Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Thanks for joining us here on the Paul Leslie Hour. We have a very special in-studio guest, Benjamin Ryan Williams. A lot of people call someone named Benjamin Ben, a.k.a. B.E.N. In this case, B.E.N. stands for Bass Every Night, or it could be Blue Evening Numbness, the title of one of his albums. Ben has been a friend of the show for years now. He's a very lovable soul, a very joyous guy. He describes himself as an ambient folk instrumentalist. Ben has always been synonymous with the bass, a session recording artist, composer, performer, and entertainer. He has been playing bass and recording with the Indigo Girls since 2012. He also has his solo discography. It's our pleasure to welcome bassist, poet, and recording artist, Benjamin Ryan Williams. Ben, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me in this lovely studio. What an introduction, too.
It's a pleasure. Now, we were talking a bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This is my favorite story about Benjamin Ryan Williams, which also is, I think, possibly the first time or one of the first times we ever met. For those of you who are familiar with Atlanta, this is not far from the music venue Smith's Old Bar. We met at this coffee shop, and you were talking about some gig that you were going to be playing, and about how far away it was. And Atlanta traffic being what it was and is. You talked about the gig, and then about a minute later, you just said, I hope I make it. And I said, you hope you make it? You mean like with the traffic and the time, the distance? And you said, no, I mean in life. I mean, I hope I make it in life. You know, the music business, all everything. I've that stayed with me. So Ben, have you made it?
Yeah, I've made it further as a musician than I ever really imagined. And of course, you know, as you get older, you make it in other ways, personally and socially, and just like how you feel about yourself. So, there's always more room to grow and get better, but I feel better than I did that afternoon, probably. So, good coffee at that place, though.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, I was fired up. Yeah, and I'm sure I made it to that gig in the evening as well.
So, how do you define making it? What does that mean to you?
I think it's important, that everybody kind of sets their own parameters for what that means. Personally, I think that I always wanted to reach a point where, I felt good in any and all musical situations, and I also wanted to reach a point where I was kind of offering something musically to the world that it doesn't really, that I hadn't really seen before or heard before. That's obviously like a lifelong project. But I think that's a really important part about being a musician or an artist, is trying to pave your own lane and do something as original as you can.
I think also one of our first conversations that we had was, I asked you something like, what do you think of the bass as a solo instrument? What do you think of the bass as a solo instrument?
Well, as a solo instrument, it's very cool. You don't see a lot of solo bass guitarists. I believe that's probably more because you just haven't before. It's not because it can't be a great solo instrument. I think the fact that it's lower in pitch makes it kind of more interesting to listen to. It has a lot more warmth to it than maybe like a higher octave guitar of some kind. And then I also think, people, I hope, right, when people see me play bass as a solo instrument, they're like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could do things like that. And that's, kind of the MO of this project, just trying to put something new out there. I think as a solo instrument, in short, I guess, very underrated. I would like to see more solo bass players, I hope, one day, but not as good as me.
So maybe you'd like to give the listeners a little taste of what that's like.
Yeah, for sure. I will play a little bit of a song coming out, within the next year at some point. It's a new one, so I think it'll be fun to play right now. Thank you.
Beautiful, Ben.
Thanks a lot, man.
Wow. That was incredible.
Ooh, I appreciate it. That song is called Tell Me You Love Me, You Don't Have to Mean It.
You have a lot of very interesting titles for your songs.
Thank you.
Do people tell you that a lot?
Yeah, I think when you are an instrumentalist, right, the only lyrics that you have are the titles of your songs. So I'm glad that people appreciate them and think that they're cool and not just kind of verbose. So it's, lucky in that way.
When you're composing something, are you seeing anything in your head or are you imagining anything? What's going through your mind when you're coming up with one of these melodies?
This is an interesting question because I don't want to use the cop-out answer and be like, oh, it's a lot of different things, which is true. But if I'm pressed, I think my aim when I'm writing a piece of music is to capture some sort of feeling, and like a feeling that like passes by like really quick. But I kind of want to make like a musical moment out of it. So it's almost like when you kind of are having those moments in your life where you reflect upon like the transient nature of existence, the moments that, are seconds but seem like they last a little bit longer. That's like what I'm aiming for usually when I make music. But then sometimes when I compose music, it gets like musical, pretty musical. Like I will read about a composer in a way that they did something. I'll be like, oh man, that's cool. I want to try that. So a few different ways.
Interesting. So when you compose, would you say that is it more story oriented or is it more emotional?
I would say I've always been a big folk musician fan. And I've always wanted my songs to be probably more affiliated with stories or like a narrative than something emotional. Because I feel like a smart listener, which is like most people who listen to music, everyone's so good at listening to music nowadays. they'll like extrapolate their own emotion anyway. So it might seem kind of silly for me to try to be like, this means, I'm trying to make this song feel happy or wistful or whatever. I'm trying to just almost like create a painting for somebody to feel like what they want inside of. I hope that's kind of the goal anyway.
Do you ever have people tell you about what they think a song is about or what they maybe imagined? This melody, this song that you were just playing for us, I had some images that were floating through my head while you were playing them.
Oh, it's cool.
So is that something that people tell you regularly about?
Yeah, people come up with some very odd images associated with music, which I think is cool. The human imagination is really fired up when you listen to music. So I appreciate that people tell me, what did you have in mind? What were the images in your head? I'm curious now.
Ben, I'll tell you if you tell me about one of those odd ones.
Okay. There was a track I recorded. I think it was off my first album, which is called Bass Every Night. The song was called We All Drink Too Much Cheap Wine. And one of my friends told me when she listened to it, she imagined a field of bunny rabbits on ecstasy. And I don't know what to do with that information. I appreciate the visual. I don't know. I don't think about rabbits like partying like that usually. But just stuff like that, I'm like, wow, if I was able to make some music that made somebody think about that, then I will have actually made it. Going back to the first question.
So what I was envisioning while you were playing that song, I imagined an aerial view of frozen polar ice caps.
Ooh.
And it was like a plane, or maybe we couldn't even see the plane. We just had the ability to fly over that frozen land. Very serene, very cold, but very alone.
Oh, that's pretty good. I like that. You might have to do the liner notes on the album.
If you ask me to.
Yeah.
So you were saying that folk music is a big part of your life and of your taste. I remember one time I interviewed the great Janice Ian.
Oh, of course.
And you had me tell her something. And so I'm just curious to know, the music that you most identify with, or the music that you most love, what would that be?
This is a tough one, because like growing up in Atlanta, like my first musical love was, as I'm sure like most people my age who grew up in Atlanta, is rap music, like through and through. So there's always a big place in my heart for that. I did have a music teacher one time who told me that I should listen to a new type of music every day to expand my emotional range as a person. And I tried to really take that to heart. So I do like a lot of music. Folk music I really appreciate because I feel like to some degree it's more an accurate representation of what regular people are going through within like a country or a culture or what have you. And I think that's really fun because there's like this historical element to folk music, like preserving the stories of, regular people like me. You're like a bit too awesome to be regular, but they've got folk music for that too. But I think folk music is probably the coolest with respect to its influence on culture. And I grew up listening to a lot of it. But, my favorite artist, Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder.
Of course, yeah. I think he's like a really true positive force in the music world. In addition to being just like an out of control, good harmonica player, drummer, keyboard player, singer, arranger, entertainer. But I think he's like a really cool ambassador of music. So like if aliens ever come to Earth and we show them Stevie Wonder, I think they'll be like, oh man, this is tight. Like this is all right. So he's he has a folk music element to his stuff as well, in the sense that like his lyrics are about real things that people go through. So hope that answers the question.
Who are the composers who you would say have had the biggest influence on you?
Okay. I think I can narrow it down to three like big ones in terms of like this solo bass thing that I am trying to do. So like number one I would go with, and it was cool because you interviewed him, it was awesome, Bill Frisell.
Oh yeah.
Definitely like the biggest influence I think on like how I wanted to present music. I just thought he was so cool, and he kind of does whatever he wants, but is so good that everyone lets him do it. And I just thought it was a really cool approach to like playing the guitar. So I tried to like adapt a little bit of that to bass. Then, I'm a big fan of Claude Debussy, like early 1900s French impressionistic music, because he was like a pretty big rebel harmonically. He just sort of did what he wanted to do. And he had some success too, which is always nice. Let's see. And then the third, like, I was such a big Hall & Oates fan for such a long time that I just wanted to have like that effect on people when I played, where it was like almost like instantaneous. You start listening, you're like, oh damn, this is good. Like I wanted to have that feeling like come out of my record. So we'll see if I ever hit it, because those are three like absolute all-time legends, or four, I guess. Hall & Oates, two people.
Interesting. It's quite a mix of stuff.
Yeah. I think that's good, though. It's like music is a really wonderful way to learn things about yourself and about the world. And if you have like a really varied approach to listening to music, the hope is that it'll turn you into like a more vast, diverse human being. And I really believe that, because I've got no business being even a tiny bit diverse. But I've got some because I've been fortunate enough to study different types of music.
Well, Ben, would you like to play another song?
Yeah, let's do it.
For the listeners out there.
This song is called No Kid Could Do That, Only God Could Do That. Here we go.
Very good.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad you like it.
It's great.
It's always nerve-wracking to play some music that's weird in front of people who have great mustaches.
You're kind. Well, amongst the people that you find are really enjoying your stuff, the people that you get to meet and the people you encounter on social media and what have you, do you notice any commonality among those people?
Oh, this is an interesting question because, like, when you're trying to, like, be an artist, you sort of do want to, you don't want to care too much about who you're making stuff for, but it's music. So it feels like I like people to enjoy music. I want to make music that people enjoy. So you're always kind of asking yourself, like, who is the B.E.N. fan, if there is one? It does seem like a lot of people who have, like, a heavy interest in yoga really like my music, which makes sense. It's pretty relaxing. I've never done yoga in a class myself personally. So I think that is kind of a funny commonality. But it is like a nice mix of people who like kind of in the instrumental, like, jazz style, which I think is cool because I'm not really playing jazz, like, at all. It's just instrumental. But it's nice that those people appreciate what I'm doing. And then, yeah, kind of like your, like, new age yoga people. And then, some regular, it sounds weird to call people regular people, like regular music listeners, I think like it if they're exposed to it. It's just harder to find the exposure in front of that group of people sometimes. But I would hope that everyone listens to my music is thoughtful and open-minded. I think to like what I do and to even maybe like me as a person, you have to be kind of open-minded.
Ben, you were mentioning that your beginnings were in Atlanta, but I know that originally it was Texas, wasn't it?
Yeah. Born in Dallas.
Dallas.
Moved to Atlanta when I was very young. But I like to think that the Texas influence is, like, kind of still in my character. Just that sort of, like, Wild West, stupid self-confidence that hopefully doesn't get on too many people's nerves.
You would describe yourself as a confident person?
Yeah, I think maybe, everyone's got doubts about who they are or whatever's happening in the world. But I think anybody who gets out of bed every day and just tries their best possesses some confidence. So I can at least do that.
Is there any kind of music that you don't like?
Oh, okay. Not really in terms of, like, pure music, but I certainly do get a little flummoxed when I see, like, an artist with a huge platform not really using it to express anything that, promotes, like, positive values in the world, without naming any names, obviously. But I think when music becomes purely commercial, you should just, like, make pharmaceuticals or something. You know what I mean? It seems like there should be no business for, like, only commercial music. Now, if you make something that has value and it sells a lot of copies, like, that's great. But yeah, there are a lot of artists out there, I think, who maybe just get caught up in trying to be the best they can. And the way that they think to do that is to, like, make the most obvious stuff. So I'm not a big fan of that. But that, I guess, isn't really a type of music.
I got you.
It's a type of people.
Would there be any band or artist that maybe would be in your Spotify playlist or on your iPhone or in your CD collection that we would be surprised?
Let me think about that. This is a really good question. I think it would. People might be, like, a bit surprised by, like, how much. I would say, like, late 80s to mid 90s country music I listen to, especially after hearing me play those last two songs. So, like, I'm a big Deanna Carter fan. And, like, I don't know if you would get that if I was like, yeah, I play this weird ambient solo bass, but, Strawberry Wine is, like, one of the best songs I've ever heard.
It is a great song.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, I have never been the person described in that song, and yet I can feel it. And I think that's a really cool thing about songs, when they really put you in a place where you can just become a bit more empathetic. Like, I have no connection to that person in the song, and every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, that's me.
What do you like about country music?
Ooh. I appreciate that there's a strong emphasis on storytelling and musicality. You know, I don't think like country musicians are out there trying to play like they're Charlie Parker, but you can tell that they have respect for their craft and they've practiced. And I really like that. It also just seems like music that people like and I like, and sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yesterday, I was chatting on the phone for a minute with Gene Dunlop, and he, for many years, was the band leader of Loretta Lynn.
Oh, nice.
And he was telling me that backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, he would play jazz music backstage, and so many of the musicians would join in.
Yeah. I think musicians like jazz because it's like... Yeah, it's like, it is a very sophisticated art form, right? Like, we can pick it apart and it can become very dense harmonically and rhythmically. But I think a lot of musicians like it because it's so expressive. And it's like one of those expressions that you can really only get out through playing music. You know, like, we could talk and like we could have a great talk, but it's hard to just get all that wackiness out. And I think in jazz, like, you can really push your expression in a way that feels comfortable, but also difficult. This would be my interpretation of why people like jazz music. Maybe they just like the chords. I don't know.
And what about the bass? Why is it that Benjamin Ryan Williams plays the bass? Why wasn't it some other instrument?
It's hard to remember back and find like a definite reason, because I do play some other instruments, but the bass was the first and certainly the one that I care about the most. I think what it really was when I first started taking lessons, I had like just a wonderful mentor who played the bass, and I was like, I want to be like this guy. He seems happy. He's got a good home life. He's creative, engaged. And it just goes to show you, right? Like, the people that you meet when you're first starting out in anything really can make a difference, like for better or worse. And I was very lucky to meet a guy who connected some of the tenets of being like a quality human with how to play the bass correctly, which is something I'll always be grateful for. And his name is Rob Schaefer, great bass player in Atlanta.
What do you think about Atlanta? You've been here for a while now.
I think Atlanta is cool. You know, I've spent a lot of time like touring the United States, quite a bit in Europe and Asia the past year. And Atlanta is a special place that has international appeal, which I didn't really expect when I first moved here. It was a city for sure, but it's really grown and it's created a culture all of its own. So like, I was playing in Zurich not long ago, and after the show, a bunch of people came up to me. They're like, "Oh, you're from Atlanta," because they read it in my like biography. I was like, "Yeah, I'm from Atlanta. Like, do you know anything about it?" They're like, "Oh, we love Donald Glover. We're going out to this bar every Wednesday night is Atlanta night. They just play Usher, Outkast, TLC." And I was just like, damn, this is cool. Like, this is my city. And in terms of being a musician, you know, you can move to there are some other cities maybe where you could have more exposure or make more money. The quality of life, I don't think, is as high in those cities. And I think that matters to being a person and also a musician. And in Atlanta, something that I've been really lucky to do is to, you know, record with folk musicians, with hip hop musicians, do musicals. I think like the hodgepodge of culture and vibes in the city, it just really makes it a more exciting and engaging place to be a musician.
On that note, Ben, I don't want to get too pushy.
Nice.
But would you play another song for us?
Yeah, for sure. I did have a question. Is that okay to ask?
Go ahead.
Can I play covers on here?
You can play a cover.
You sure?
You can now.
I don't have to. I can play.
If you really want to play a cover, you can play a cover.
The reason I brought it up is because I was like, oh, I'm doing an interview with Paul. Like, Paul loves songwriters. I got to bring the heat. with a great song. So I was whipping up a Tracy Chapman Fast Car cover.
Oh, wow.
But I don't have to do it. I can play an original.
Do it.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad. Okay, here we go. Just give me a second to set up. This is one of my favorite songs. Another one of those songs that I would say, like, I have not been the person in the song, any of the people in this song, and yet, like, I can feel the real feeling from her. I think she's a genius, so I'm excited to play this one. Thank you.
That was great.
That was cool.
Oh,
Okay,
man.
But, what a song, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whew.
As you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just instrumentalists who have had an effect on you. Tracy Chapman,
Mm-hmm.
Janice Ian, these folk musicians. I want you to tell us a little bit about your interest in poetry. Is there an intersection there?
Ooh, I think so. Okay. When I first started recording solo instrumental music, I wanted the songs to like resemble poems in feeling more than like maybe if you think about like a classic album of music, you think of it more as like a book almost, like a novel. And I wanted my stuff to be like shorter and maybe more emotionally dense so you could keep coming back to it with your new perspective each time. Because something that I love about poetry is, for the most part, it's short, right? Like, I've read like certain Langston Hughes poems like 600 times without even really trying to, right? It just kind of happens. There are some books that have profoundly changed my life, some novels that I've only read twice. I think I was trying to hit similar feelings of poetry, like the ambiguity, that just kind of like coming back to this thing. So I hope I accomplish it with music. I studied poetry in college. I had a poetry scholarship to university. And I just really thought it was cool, like that you could say a lot forever with so little. And I always felt like poetry was like the most respectful to the reader. Because instead of being like, here are all my thoughts about something, it'd be like, oh, here's like the fleeting moment. I'm going to write down some words and just like do what you do with it when you read it. And I always thought that was cool. You know, the oral tradition of music and things, like it's carried on by the people who hear songs. It's not totally always about the people who write the songs. So I always felt that way with poetry. I think poetry is very cool. Doesn't get the love that it deserves amongst regular folk, I think. You know what I mean? When you say poetry, it's like, oh, you think of something like very highfalutin, but it's not. It doesn't have to be that way.
You've worked with so many artists as an accompanist, performing with them, recording with them. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about that, the experience of playing with all these different people. Who sticks out in your mind?
So I would say, like, I love performing with other people. I really love, you know, when I was younger and I first started out, there was like a bit of ego involved. Like I wanted to be like the best at playing with other people. And I can be kind of competitive. That could be the Texas thing. But as I got a little bit older, I started to realize like, oh, when you're performing with somebody, like if you're like really selfless and you try to help them attain what they want to do, God, what a great feeling. And, you know, I've been really fortunate to play with so many people. I would say like some folks that immediately come to mind is like obviously played with a lot of rappers in Atlanta. I record a lot with this guy, DJ B.E.N, who I think is like one of the most creative producers, engineers, mixers, like making music out there. And I really like love his like courage and creativity. He just kind of goes for it. I played with the Indigo Girls, who are like all-time legends out of Atlanta. I would say like, and obviously like I have a soft spot for them, right? But like, I would say that they are probably one of the coolest music duos to ever like have success, like in America. Like just everything that they stand for, the type of music that they make, the fact that they do not compromise. All these things are really cool about them. And then another person that I've played with who I think is like exceptionally talented is a producer and engineer who I think lives in LA now, but when I met him, he was in Atlanta, obviously. His name's B.E.N. And what I love about Pierre is he like is the most hardworking dude. He stayed in a studio making beats for like a whole year. I don't think he was living anywhere else. Just like sleeping on a couch. And, you know, that energy is tough to keep up, right? But like, it's so cool to be around somebody who likes music that much. And, you know, anytime you work with people, you kind of get a little bit of their sauce and they get a little bit of yours. And then I guess I got to mention like Wesley Cook, of course.
You're right.
Yeah. Wesley was one of the first people who like put me on playing in groups around town in Atlanta. And I will always appreciate that. And what a cool dude. And that's how I know you also.
Right. My friend Jason Burge, who played keyboards on some of Wesley Cook's gigs.
Yeah.
I remember after one of the shows, and he was talking about how much fun he had playing with you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he said a lot of times when people would start to jam or whatever, it would be like the bass player, he's communicating with the drummer right now. And now he's communicating with the guitar player. The keyboardist is he said, is left in the corner.
Yeah.
And he said, I loved the fact that you came over and you wanted to jam with me.
Well, Jason's a cool dude, so like I'm surprised not everybody wanted to jam with him. But yeah, I feel bad for keys players sometimes because they got lots of equipment. You know what I mean? Yeah, I love making music with people. It's one of those things. Like I enjoy a lot of things about being alive, but that's one of those things that like just feels really good all the time. And you can't really turn away from those things. So that's cool. I'm glad Jason likes playing with me. It's really nice to hear. I got to say hello to that guy.
So the Indigo Girls, what are they like to work with, whether you're recording with them or you're doing a show?
When I first started playing with them, I was really blown away by how they approached things. And I really learned a lot from it. Because, I'm coming into this gig. I'm pretty young. And, you think that things are going to be one way. And like I definitely thought they were gonna bust my butt. Like I thought it was gonna be really hard, and it was challenging to learn, 80 songs and be able to recall them all the time. But I thought they were gonna give a lot more direction and be like, the awful stories we hear about people who are truly great, right? But I think what was cool about them is they were just kind of like, oh, do your own thing. I showed up and like I was playing and they were like, that's great, we love you. And it was pretty much like that the whole time. And I think like that speaks to what I am guessing is part of their like professional philosophy, which I've tried to adapt, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. You put the right people in positions, right? And then you let them be themselves. You can't micromanage the way that a person does anything that involves like a degree of subtlety, like especially playing music. And I really just appreciated that they were like, they liked me, they liked how I played. They were just like, all right, let's let it ride. And I love that. You don't always get that when you play with people, and you always have to do your best, but it's always nice when somebody wants you for who you are.
I want to go back to something you said a moment ago. You said that performing is one of the reasons you like to be alive.
Yes.
What else? What do you like about being alive?
I like that. Okay. I like some really specific things. So we'll start with that, and then I'll try to come up with something that sounds smarter than what I'm about to say. I really like collaborating with people. I really like watching and playing basketball. I really like to read. I think reading is very important. It is a way. I like to travel too, but reading is a way of traveling that's very inexpensive, and I can do it from home. So I really like to read. I think I like doing things that engage my mind, and that oftentimes means doing things that engage my body. Listening to music with my eyes closed is one of my favorite activities. I think that's very important. I like to hear about other people's life experience. It doesn't always make me happy, but I think it's important to try to appreciate what other people are going through. So if I were to extrapolate like a good overview, I like what happens when you get a group of people together and they try to work together on something.
Wow.
That's all nonsense.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's funny to say that, especially like as I come here playing music on my own. But I also like doing things on my own,
Huh. I always like to give the guest the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Just let them take the microphone. We just never know who's listening. What would you say to anyone who's tuned in?
I would say that I would recommend, and I just said this, listening to music with your eyes closed. Pick something once a day, once a week, close your eyes and get in that world. I think a lot of times we we forget about this whole world that's in our heads. And like, it's important not to live there. You know, you can't be delusional, or you should try your best not to. But I think it's important to spend some time by yourself with your thoughts. And music is a great way to organize that. I would really like heavily recommend that to everybody, even if you don't like music, which I can't imagine you would be listening to this if you didn't, especially still. But I think it can really help you grow as a person and learn ways to be yourself in an environment that maybe you're not familiar with. So hopefully, if anyone is listening to that and they made sense out of it, I hope they liked it.
What is the best thing about being Benjamin Ryan Williams?
Oh, good question. I mean, the best thing is that I've been lucky enough to be a professional musician and explore this weird world for so long, and I hope to keep doing it. Waking up every day with a zeal for life and enthusiasm is really lucky, and I don't take it for granted at all. I would bet most people doing something that they enjoy feel that way. And I hope most people get the opportunity to do something that they feel passionate about. I know that's certainly been the best part about being me, other than the fact that I keep lucking out and meeting incredible people all the time. But, you know, we'll see how long that lasts.
My last question.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Ben? How would you define Benjamin Ryan Williams?
I would say I'm a person trying his best to do something that I'm a person trying his best to be somebody who inspires other people. To try. I don't even really want to inspire people to be good at anything necessarily, because I don't think that's really up to us. But I would like for people who come across me to be like, oh, you know, like, Ben's cool. Maybe I should try painting even though I don't know how. Or maybe I should go for an advanced degree. It's just nice to be, you know, I would hope to be a person that lights a fire under people and gets them to engage in like their own lives. Because I am trying to do that every day.
Ben, you're very cool.
Thanks a lot, man. That's awesome. You know, I think you're cool. And I did have a mustache like 2 weeks ago. Not as good as yours.
Everyone out there, they can visit basseverynight.com. Basseverynight.com. Mm-hmm. Also, check out the Twitter at basseverynight.
Yeah, love Twitter.
That you do. Ben, a lot of times when I have a guest in the studio, I like to close this way if they're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is about the end, but I like something kind of melancholy to send the listeners on their way. Something maybe a little slow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a melody you could play to send everyone on their way?
Yes, absolutely. I have a great one. Let me just set up down here. This is a song, or this will be a melody from a song that I recorded called Lonely People Without Much to Do with Their Nights, which is, I got the idea walking around downtown Cincinnati and seeing, it was really late, like after a gig, I think it was like 11 p.m. on like a Friday, and I saw so many people in their offices with the lights on. And it just, you know, it's not necessarily about that, but it's just about how I was kind of overcome with this idea that like, oh damn, like a lot of people are just by themselves all the time. And we don't have a lot to do. Like even myself, like I do have a lot to do, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And I wanted to try to write a song that like captures that feeling of just being like, oh, like I'm alone. I don't have anything going on. Not in a bad way necessarily, right? Like that could be something you look forward to, but I just wanted to try to capture that isolation and independence. So here it is. Thank you.
Beautiful, Ben.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. This was really fun.
Pleasure to know you.
Yeah, of course, man. It's always good to link back up.
Absolutely. Until next time.